Hello, and thank you to everyone joining today. Every episode, we do our best to bring you the most relevant information with the most trusted and experienced sources. And today is no different. Joining me is Leslie Bender, who is a 40-year veteran of the fitness industry and recipient of the 2020 IDEA Personal Trainer of the Year Award. And if that name sounds familiar, you might recognize it from her book, I Am Ageless Now, or possibly her very own creation, the Bender Ball, which we are going to talk a little bit about today too. So her most recent publication with Human Kinetics is Vital Core Training, and she is here to tell us all about the book and to talk to us about the importance of training the core. So again, thank you so much for jumping on here today, Leslie. I really appreciate it.
Oh, I'm honored to be here, and this book has definitely been a work of passion and purpose for many, many years, and so it's finally coming to fruition.
Yep.
And everyone that's bought it so far has just reached out to me and said, "Oh my gosh, I feel so different since I've been actually doing this form of core training
Mm,
versus traditional core training," which I'm sure we're going to discuss here.
right. No, definitely. We'll get into a lot of that. So I gave a brief introduction there to kind of introduce you to everyone listening. But I'm sure you can give much more insight. And I guess in the introduction of the book, you explained that you have been in the fitness industry for a while. Why got you interested in the fitness industry? And if you can give us an idea of how you progressed in your career to get to where you are today.
Great question. Well, um, I'm going to go back to my
Okay.
20s. And so I was actually studying in college both business, and then I decided that I'd go to PT school.
Hmm.
And what I didn't find passion in was my business education, even though I got a degree in it. And I found with PT that it wasn't as to me as impactful as back in the day of aerobics. And with
Hmm.
that being said, true story, my first aerobics class was with none other than Jane Fonda.
Oh,
And
okay.
yeah, I know, right? And I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. And so starting like everyone else, it was all high intensity aerobics. And when we first started, Aaron, there wasn't a thing called a certification, and finally, AFA and IDEA came out with certifications, and lots of other organizations, but it was a free for all.
Okay.
And so a big lead up to where this book is and where I am today is there wasn't science into practice. It was go hard or go home. I mean, it was a badge of honor to be sore the next day, which now that I'm in my 60s, I'm not the only one that is a recipient of a joint replacement, all of
Right.
which could be prevented, but yet we still are kind of doing some of these dumb exercises. I hate to say it, I have no filter in the industry today. And anyone that's watching this that's younger, like yourself, if you're not cognizant of the way that you're training, at some point in time, you're going to wind up with joint issues. And so a lot of that, back when I first discovered Pilates in 1999, I found, because I studied in New York, that many of the Pilates exercises were, you know, not great for the back. And of course, back then, most of the education and or exercises were very much designed for dancers, which is a different crowd and a whole different animal. And so long story short, I was teaching in Germany and I discovered this small ball, and I thought, wow, that's it. This is the solution to doing a lot of Pilates exercises and core exercises. So I was the first to bring a small ball back to the US and start. And I tell you what, Aaron, I couldn't keep them in stock. Once people, felt the difference in their Pilates practice, they're like, wow, I can still embrace the principles of Pilates without compromising my back. So anyway, fast forward to about the year 2005, 2006, I had the Pilates coach, which was my training company, and we were progressive. We were very much ahead of our time and still are. And long story short, I was at the IDEA conference with my small ball and the owner of Xavier Fitness, a very well-known big infomercial company. Jeff came up and he said, "So, what do you do with that little ball?" And I said, "Well, Mr. Teller, let me show you some exercises." And he said, "That's amazing because everyone is still embracing the Swiss ball or the large
Mhm.
ball, which is great. But at the end of the day, most people have, they have exercise equipment and, it's a dust catcher or a place for your laundry to hang." And so this is something that can be used anywhere, anytime. So needless to say, in 2007, when I got hired as the talent for this program, and then they used my name. Long story short, it was one of the top infomercials that company had ever seen in 2007. But prior to that, to me was very exciting, if you make a claim, especially for a fitness infomercial or any kind of infomercial, it has to be legitimately tested. So we tested basically my ball before it became the Bender ball at Loma Linda University, and
Yep.
they did a very arduous test with it on the activation of the core being 408% higher than doing crunches on the floor or a large stability ball.
Mm.
And I'll get into that later. But
Yeah.
it was really cool to see that there is scientific research behind this program, that we're not just throwing things out. And then in 2010, I wanted to further my career as far as not going into PT, but I wanted to really bridge the gap between science and practice. And that's when I discovered Gary Gray, and I'm a graduate
Mhm.
of the Gray Institute of Applied Functional Science. And for me, that was the most life-changing program I've ever gone through. What I paid for it, I could have gone back to school, but and I hear so many times when fitness professionals say, "Oh, I don't want to pay out, to go for an education." And it's like, it's our profession and it's our
Mhm.
responsibility to truly understand why we're doing movement. And Gary Gray enlightened over 100 of us in that program for the year of the importance of understanding, where you reach, there's a reaction in the whole entire body, and just amazing. And then since then, I've had the opportunity of taking some courses with Thomas Myers, and that was a cadaver lab, primarily focusing on fascia, and then
Mhm.
Michelle Dalcourt following up with movement. So for me, Aaron, I think that we cannot emphasize enough the importance of our education and truly understanding what we're doing with people. And the reason I say that is they see us more than they do see a medical professional. So we really have the opportunity to be part of the solution, or are we, part of the cause of people getting hurt. And I think a lot of core exercises, especially crunches, et cetera, are causing more harm to people than good. I mean, we're sitting here and, we're sitting in a chair right now. Our posture's
Mhm.
good. We're fitness pros, but
Yeah.
a regular person watching this,
Mhm.
this cast would be probably maybe a little bit hunched over, and we don't realize that creating a conscious movement becomes a subconscious result. So if I live in flexion, why
Yeah.
would I want to lay down on the ground and do more flexion? So there you go. That is a very
Yeah.
long roundabout story of where I am today.
No, it I think it was great because it gives everyone perspective on your education, where you've been, why you have the perspective that you do. So all of that's very great. One thing that I did want to ask about, and you kind of mentioned it, how is the Bender ball different from a regular Swiss ball? Because obviously in the size, that is probably the most obvious there. But I think for a while, it seems like most gyms that I've been in will have the big Swiss balls, and to your point, I think they probably don't get used a whole lot. Maybe not as much as they could. Maybe people don't know how to use them, but also to a point that you made, with a smaller ball, it can travel with you. You can probably do so much more with it. So I guess explain to our audience what the difference is and what the benefits of using a smaller ball like this would be.
Well, let's just take, for example, two different scenarios. So in other words, if you have an ergonomic office chair with a large ball sitting on it,
Yeah,
that's awesome. Can't do it with a small ball for obvious reasons.
sure.
Although you can't put a big ball behind your low back while you're sitting. And you can put the small ball behind your back, which forces you into better posture because when you lean back against it, you're actually activating the anterior part of the body. So that's one thing as far as those that are watching that, do sit at a desk. I like the ergonomic chairs. I think they're brilliant. But when we talk about a gym scenario with a large ball, it takes balance. And a lot of times, if you're trying to do a movement, and let's say you're sitting on the big ball, and I use them, I think they're great. But if you're sitting on it, your whole nervous system and your vestibular system are adjusting to the fact that you're on a very big unstable surface. Does that make sense, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
so you might be thinking to yourself more about the aspect of losing balance as to where the small ball, placing it behind the lumbar spine, because you want the lumbar spine to be stable, but you want your thoracic spine to be able to move, right? So when we
Yep.
look at mobility versus stability, we want mobility in the upper back. So the small ball placed behind the lumbar spine gives you stability while you can increase mobility in the thoracic spine, which is harder to do on a Swiss ball. And I think honestly, that's why I don't see them used as much in the gym. I don't, in the place that I'm employed, I hardly ever see them being
Yeah.
used. And I think, they're a great tool, but what gets used, and of course puts a smile on my face. I see every class using the green ball, and I'm like, yay.
Yep.
Yeah. So it makes me very happy.
Yep. No, absolutely. So, I mean, we are talking about the importance of core training, because I think when I won't say most, I'll say many people think about core training. They might think about the aesthetics of training the core. Uh, I can't even say everyone, but a lot of people, want that six pack. They want their abs to show. But we know that there's so much more to core training, so many more benefits to core training. So, I guess from your perspective and what's in the book, what can you explain about the exact benefits of training the core are?
Wow, that's a big question.
Yeah.
So let's talk about aesthetics.
Yeah.
Your um, your abs are made in the kitchen, and
Yeah.
your core is made by training functionally. And every time and this is a Gary Grayism, every time the foot hits the ground, you have a chain reaction.
Mhm.
So every time our foot enters into the ground, we're activating our core because of the fact that everything is surrounded by fascia. And so, for example, you're sitting there, so just grab like a corner of your shirt, and you're going to notice that the fabric actually tightens on one side, right?
Mhm.
So it's similar to that if we were to actually lean back or lean forward, we're going to feel like a tightness in the fascial tissue and a release in the fascial tissue, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
If I'm living in flexion over a desk, basically that whole posterior fascial line is becoming overstretched as to where my anterior fascial line is becoming kind of short and tight, if that makes sense. So then if I'm going to lay down on the ground to do more crunches, or I'm doing kicking my legs out and only activating the transverse about 11%, then with that being said, I'm perpetuating a poor postural habit if I'm laying on the floor. And the big thing is, Aaron, if you can show me, how would you throw a ball? Like if you're going to throw a baseball at me, how would you do it? Even sitting in a chair, what would be the first thing
Even
that you would
well,
do?
even sitting in a chair, I'm going to get a little bit of rotation in through this way, and then I'm going to follow
You
through, obviously.
You got it. So if you were laying on the floor, would you have that rotation? Or would you have a load to explode?
No,
You would
no.
not. So with the ball behind your back, you have load to explode. So you're
Oh, yeah.
completely winding up that whole fascial line in the front and the posterior and lateral lines of the body. And this is what's so cool is you get that load to explode, which our body craves. So the more we like, and and I hear this all the time in fitness professionals go squeeze, tuck, tighten,
Yep.
burn, pull it in. Well, if you're tightening down your body, you're going to restrict motion everywhere because, again, of this thing called fascia. So the importance of core training is vital. It's how we do it, and that can be balance training, that can be lunges. All of this is in the book, which is cool. And we just simply incorporate the ball as an aid for some of the core training. But for the kinesthetic learner, it also provides kinesthetic feedback, which otherwise you're not going to get.
Yep.
So again, whether we're doing vertical core training, sideline core training, et cetera, you want to be training your body in all positions with sort of a minimum being on your back, planking and all those different positions that we can put our bodies in depending on the level of participant are all ones that we need to consider because that's life. That is absolutely life, and I don't think a lot of times, especially like when I came out of having my knee replacement, um, it's like I refuse to use a walker. It's like, oh my God, that defines me as an old lady. And I hobbled around, but the main thing I forced myself to do was keep working, on my core. I also, forced myself to get up and down off the floor because I thought to myself, if I get down, I got to get back up. So I look at training the body as functionally as we possibly can do it. And that can be as simple as doing reaches over your head, across your body, throwing a ball like you just demonstrated there. Our body craves to lengthen versus shorten.
Yeah. So one thing that stands out when I hear you talking about all this is that some people might not be able to move in certain positions. Maybe they have limitations. Maybe they have back pain. Maybe their hips don't work as well as they can. So they feel like they need to be on the ground or on the floor training. Is this an area where that might also help in kind of using that ball behind your
Yeah,
back, like you said, so that you can get a little
absolutely.
more movement?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, we did an analysis at Loma Linda University with the ball behind the low back, and this was a different program on healthy back. That's actually what it was called. And we actually utilized primarily young people with back problems. And their back problems exponentially went down. And again, this was a test scenario with Dr. Petrosky at Loma Linda University. Um, and so their back problems exponentially went down, keeping in mind that a lot of our back problems come from incorrect core training. Again, especially doing crunches, because
Mhm.
if you think about the neck, I mean, in our head, depending on how much our head weighs, every time we bring our head forward, we're adding another 25 pounds to the cervical spine. So our body's really craving to be in this homeostasis of upright position, right? So again, when we're doing the core training with a ball behind the back, we're essentially in a neutral position. And then, of course, we're adding rotation to that. But one of the
Mhm.
things that I emphasize in the book is where is your range of motion?
Yep.
What works for you rather than saying no pain, no gain.
Mhm.
What range of motion is comfortable, but yet you still feel the movement in your body, right?
Right.
And as far as some of the supine exercises, we've got a couple at the end where it's a non-gravitational movement to lengthen the hip flexors because you're supine and gravity doesn't have an effect. And that one last stretch in the back of the book is amazing. And people feel the difference like immediately after they've done that stretch. And there's no load on the body.
Mhm.
Unlike if you're doing a standing lunge and you're focusing on lengthening the hip
Yep.
flexors, which is vital. But, like me, after I had my knee surgery, I couldn't do that. So the ball was my best friend for my rehab, and it probably helped me rehab quicker than otherwise. So I know it works.
It's that's awesome and such a good testimonial. One of the things that comes to mind when I hear you talking about all this is that I will have, I guess in my own career, I'll have, I do train a lot of athletes. So like you mentioned, people of all ages, and they'll come in and say, hey, I have this back pain, or my hips feel weird, my hips feel off. And honestly, one of the first places I go is, let's look at your core. We probably need to strengthen your core a little bit more. Is that something that you've seen across the board too?
Oh, for
Is that
sure. And so um the dude on the book, right? The
okay?
cover of the
Yeah.
book. Um Here's a young guy, right?
Mhm.
And so just even in the cover photo where we have him, he had never he this was his first time using the ball, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And as you can see, he's lean, he's cut, he
Yep.
looks great. The minute we put the ball behind his low back, and I said, "All right, I need you to lean back a little bit." And he started shaking like crazy, and he goes, "What's wrong with me?" And I said, "You're weak."
Yeah.
Your core, I said, aesthetically, you've got amazing looking
Yeah.
abs,
Right.
not core. So, needless to say, he was so cute. He's like, "I'm going to start doing these every day." And I said, "Yeah, get back to me on that, and you let me know how you improve." So even though your strongest looking athlete, like I used to train Prince Fielder, the baseball player, Nick
Okay. Yeah.
Collins, yeah, and then I trained Nick Collins, who played for Green Bay.
Hmm.
And both of these guys, I'd get the ball out and they'd be like, "Oh, I hate you," because they were so. And Prince came to me because of his back, and literally, I fixed him up in a couple of months, and he's like, "Are we done?" I'm like, "Yep, you're on your own now. You know what you need to do. You don't need me anymore." And
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
here's a high-end athlete, and
Yeah.
so many times again, they get massages, right? They
Hmm.
do body work and all these things, but your training regime is such a vital part of longevity and performance. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? And a lot of time athletes, they train for their performance, but they may not necessarily add in something as simple as some of the core exercises in here that is going to take up their performance exponentially.
Isn't that amazing to watch and to listen to that we think, I mean, I'll include myself on this. We think that we are very strong in certain areas and people might look very fit and athletic, and then you get them to do something that they're not used to doing, or working even, getting very specific with the muscles that you want them to use, and all of a sudden they feel weak and realize, hey, there are these other areas that I still need to train and get better at too.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, to go along with that is, I think, those of you listening and you yourself, is truly, we have um, those individuals, and I know one in particular that is just an absolute badass athlete at 70 years old. She's had two knee replacements, two hip replacements, and one of the strongest snow and water skiers I've ever met. However, I've trained her before and she's not in her body. So to me,
Mhm.
this is an anomaly. She's fantastic at what she does, but
Mhm.
to get her to actually feel something takes longer than maybe somebody who's not as fit. It's kind of
Okay.
interesting. And with that being said, the ball provides the kinesthetic
Mhm.
feedback that they can't go fast. And if you slow them down to do some of these core exercises, they'll start to have a better mind body connection, which otherwise, for whatever reason, for many people, they live outside their body and they're not able
Mhm.
to feel things. And I know we've all worked with people like that.
Yep. This is all great information. I know that a lot of people are visual learners, though, and that's something that I think the book does very well. There are a number of, actually, I mean, there's a full section, as you obviously know, of full color pictures and exercise descriptions and specific cues to make sure that everyone's doing these exercises the right way. So I know that programming can be very specific to an individual's needs, but what are some of the go-to exercises that are included in this book that you would recommend for everyone to include in their training program?
All of them.
All of them, right?
Right? Oh, there's only like 300 of them in here. Well, the book is so brilliantly really broken down into vertical,
Mhm.
kneeling, seated, side lying, supine, stretches, etc. and warm-ups and things of this nature. I would, if I were you, is to, go back and start doing some of these movements and look at these movements as a menu and a guideline. So you're looking at this menu saying, okay, this is going to work for students A, this is going to work for students B. Like if I work with pickleball players, which,
Mhm.
we got people going from couch to court, they don't warm up, and
Yeah.
there's all kinds of injuries. There's a section in here actually for rotational exercises like golf, etc. And, the vertical exercises are so crucial, but so are the rotational exercises because again, you want that synergy of your entire core body to be able to say, okay, I'm going to do this, but it needs to
Mhm.
translate to what my clients need. So if I can encourage trainers more than anything is who's your audience? What do they want? What do they need? And I ask my students all the time, what do you feel like you need today?
Mhm.
Even if I have 10 people, and then I kind of pick and choose what I feel like I would be taking out of this, if that makes sense.
Okay. No, absolutely. And just one more point to pull out of what you just said. You mentioned the rotational exercises. I think as probably as humans that get stuck in our own training plans, we forget about that transverse plane and forget that we do need, even if we're not a competitive athlete, we do need to continue training in that way.
Oh, big time.
For sure.
Big
Yeah.
time.
So um, I, I do want to thank you for your time. This has been an excellent conversation, but I didn't want to take up too much of your time. I want to be respectful of that. So I just want to emphasize it. It was great meeting you. I highly encourage everyone listening to get to know Leslie a little more and get to know her expertise by getting a copy of this book. Look up all of her other information. You're going to find information that we talked about today. Like I mentioned, full color photos, exercise descriptions. You're going to get a ton of ideas. Even myself, just looking through this book, I found exercises that I probably need to incorporate in my own training plan, that things that I probably haven't done in a little while. So definitely take advantage of that. You can get a copy on our website, us.humankinetics.com. It's also on Amazon. I'm sure you can find it many other places as well. So again, thank you so much for
Thank
your time. I appreciate it. I'll give you the last word here to kind of wrap it up and definitely let everyone know where they can follow you, keep in touch with you.
Sure, sure. Well, I'm on Facebook. If you'd like to message me on Facebook or Instagram, I'm really good at getting back to you. And then last but not least, just to throw it out there, if you go to the benderball.com, because I'm sure people are like, so where do I get a ball?
Yep.
So
Right.
you can go onto benderball.com, and in October, we are going to be doing the Benderball Core. And of course, this is what we're using as our guidance and our manual for that virtual training, which is going to be on the Benderball website. You can see it there. But I think in my closing words that, I'm so passionate about what I do. And I think for me, having a knee replacement, having the typical, aches and pains of throughout what we do in this industry, we're constantly giving to other people. I mean, it's a very selfless profession that we are in. But the number one person to take care of is yourself. And it's just so vital that, if you can do some of these exercises, feel them and embrace them in your own body, then when you go to work with your clients, you'll have a real connection with, what we're trying to emphasize here. It would be, think of it this way, is you would never invite a bunch of friends over for dinner and you had never made this dish before, you'd never tasted it before, and you're going to experiment on them. And
Right.
it's like, if it's either going to turn out amazing or it's going to be a complete disaster. So look at this core training as your recipes for some really outstanding modalities that you can protect your back, strengthen your core, knowing that a lot of, again, purpose and passion went into this book of many, many years of my education and those that I have studied with, and other authors like Kelly Roberts was part of this book as well. So, Aaron, I want to thank you. And again, I'm so honored that I got to spend some time with you and everyone
Oh,
else today. And please look me up. And if you have any questions, Leslie Bender, shoot me a, a message, and I am happy to answer any questions that you might have. And I wish you all an amazing afternoon.